Welcome, everybody. It's HogvilleNET YouTube live pregame. It's the season opener. There's a lot to be happy about if you're a college basketball fan, if you're a Razorback fan. It's opening day around the country, but if you're a Hog fan, expectations are high. That's kind of become the norm under Eric Musselman as he's now entering season 5. There was a lot of excitement in the preseason, especially the exhibition season of games. When you look at what happened in October, now we're to early November when it counts for real. But it's almost impossible to ignore what the Razorbacks did. 14th ranked preseason against the preseason third ranked Purdue Boilermakers, a team that brought back nearly everybody, including the reigning National Player of the Year. A really good team. Again, picked third by the Associated Press preseason. But when you look at the rankings across the board, a couple of number ones in there: CBS Sports, KenPom.com's ratings for Division One. The coaches has Purdue at number 2. So you get the point. This is a team that, when you look at the 81-77 overtime victory, we've really broken that down and gone through some of it. But also we're a week away from that, more than a week away now, and have had more time to reflect on what that means moving forward. I think it was a great measuring stick. But again, it was a charity exhibition game. It didn't count. And so if you're the Arkansas Razorbacks, you can't be overly confident after that game. You have to understand that everything now that's on the table really matters, not only toward your record, but your NCAA rankings that'll come out later on. You're building a resume right now for what March is going to look like. And so it starts tonight with Alcorn State. 14th ranked Razorbacks hosting Alcorn State at Bud Walton Arena. That game tips around 7 o'clock. It'll be live streamed on SEC Network Plus, the same venue that the same channel, or, the same way that you were able to watch Purdue if you watched it. That's how you're going to have to do it. And it's the first of 4 home games Arkansas has at Bud Walton Arena to open the season. You get some low to mid-major teams in, starting tonight with Alcorn State, Gardner-Webb on Friday. Then next week you get another Monday, Friday, starting on Monday with Old Dominion, and then on Friday against North Carolina Greensboro, a team that took Arkansas to the wire last year. Musselman and his staff like to schedule, even when you look at the low to mid-majors, teams that have done well in their leagues, have a chance to win their leagues, and teams that, give high majors, and there are some upsets. They'll get Furman back in Bud Walton Arena in early December, just about a month from now. Furman knocked off Virginia, a 4 seed in the last NCAA tournament. So you look at Arkansas, how tough Arkansas' schedule is when you look at some of the high major, when you look at the battle for Atlantis coming up later this month, Duke at home, everybody's wanting to talk about that already. And some other matchups, Oklahoma and Tulsa, but you've got some tough mid-major and low major games. And, Alcorn State is a 2-time defending Southwestern Athletic Conference, the SWAC, 2-time defending champion. And this is a team that checked some boxes when you look at them last year. In fact, some of the positives for Alcorn State a year ago are some of the things that we saw that were maybe a little problematic in that overtime win against Purdue. Not everything was great in that game. So we're going to get through some of the matchups, some of the things that are going to matter today in this game, but also going to talk about some of the intangibles that maybe become tangibles. So thank you for joining me again. It's HogvilleNET YouTube Live, our pregame analysis, sort of a preview of tonight's season opener against Alcorn State. We know that Eric Musselman is in his program. He's probably the best in college basketball at marketing his program, not just getting results on the court, but creating an atmosphere, creating a persona for himself and the program. And it helps explain why Arkansas has been able to sell out Bud Walton Arena several seasons in a row now. It's also a team that for the 3rd consecutive season comes in with preseason rankings. So Arkansas as a program now, that is a national brand. It is not just a really good season or a great season in a vacuum. It's building momentum. There's something there. I wrote about this yesterday when I dared to compare at hogville.net. The story's been out since yesterday. I kind of dared to compare this team in some ways to the 93-94 championship team. There might be some similarities there, but you have to kind of peel stuff back, and some of it's playful, but some of it that, this is a team that has been ramping up to move the program a step further, which is that final weekend of the NCAA tournament. We know that's the Final Four, and once you get there, you've got as good a shot as anybody at winning a national title. And so we'll see if Arkansas has the chops for something like that this year, but we're just getting started. However, game one, when you look at resume, game one matters as much as anything. You can't afford to lose a game like this at home. It wouldn't be the end of the world if you did, but I don't think Arkansas is going to be complacent. I think there's too much veteran quality on this team, and I think there's too much veteran Eric Musselman having been through every imaginable scenario in basketball from the highest levels on down in college. And I think that, you put that together, and I think he's going to have his teams ready. Doesn't mean that they won't have some mistakes, or that doesn't mean there won't be some letdowns, but there's a lot of things to pay attention to tonight. So let's get started with that. I want to, first get into what I see with this Arkansas team. I really thought against Purdue and in the previous game in the in the other exhibition game against Division II Texas Tyler, that Arkansas contested a lot of shots. There weren't a lot of open shots for either team, which says a lot already about this team locking in on that end. When you came out of the red-white game, the big question mark for Musselman was, we're turning the corner, shooting threes. We're going to be better at the free throw line. The offense is maybe, as far ahead as it's ever been in my program, probably further ahead. And that's clear because he's talked about being able to install things sooner on both ends of the floor. But I thought defensively, Arkansas's getting back to what the identity, if you ever pick an identity for an Eric Musselman coach team, it's on the defensive end. So we're looking for tonight, can Arkansas have another carryover? Now that the games matter, can Arkansas have carryover to the defensive end of the floor? I mean, you held a really good, efficient Purdue team, one of the top teams in the country last year shooting inside the arc. You held them well below their percentage inside the arc relative to last year. Overall, you held them to under 40% shooting from the field. And so, and what I, having been at that game and covered it in person, I didn't have the advantage of seeing replay, but just my impression watching it live was that Arkansas contested almost every shot. There weren't free looks given. And that was at all three levels. And when I went back and watched it, when I got back home and was able to watch the replay of it, I had it was the same takeaway. There was obviously going to be some exceptions in a 40-minute game where there's a bust or a breakdown. I think Gillis had a couple of wide open threes in that second half to help Purdue stay in that game when Arkansas was really trying to climb to a double-digit lead. But other than that, I think Arkansas could test a lot of shots. So my eyes are always going to be on defense first with Eric Musselman coach teams. Let's start there and see what fills in the gaps around that. So I'm paying attention tonight. Can Arkansas force another opponent into 20 or more turnovers? That was the case in both exhibition games. Arkansas was in double-digit steals in both of those games. 12 against Texas Tyler, 14 against Purdue. So how good is this? Are these wings? How versatile? If you look at Arkansas's front line, guys like Brazil, someone's asked me about Jalen Graham. We're going to get to that. When you look at Brazil, even Makai Mitchell, those guys were, and Chandler Lawson, don't leave that name out. The front line guys were taking steals. I mean, Brazil had 3 steals in that game, as did Lawson. I think Mitchell had a couple. So, I mean, they had the majority of the steals, and that tells you that the backcourt's doing its job. When everybody's working in concert, it makes it really tough all the way around for an offense. And you don't have just 1 or 2 guys you got to worry about, because all the talking points are Devo Davis and Tremont Mark are all SEC caliber defenders, which is true. that certainly helps. But your frontline guys are pretty savvy and work well together so far, what we've seen so far. Now it gets real. Alcorn State, we're going to get into this team, some of its players, some of what this team was good at last year, and things that might be problem areas from Arkansas that were identified against Purdue, because Alcorn State, believe it or not, brings some of that. 2-time SWAC champion. Don't sleep on a conference champion. And you can't, in college basketball, an upset can happen on any given night. That's not a cliche. It's a cliche because it's true. It happens every year. It happens a lot every year. You don't want to be one of those teams. Arkansas, 33-0 in non-conference games at Bud Walton Arena under Eric Musselman. So you like that stat. Arkansas is trying to get to 34-0. They're 4-0 in season openers under Muss. So you want to get to 5-0 there and improve that stat as well. He's 5 wins away, by the way, from getting to 100 career wins at Arkansas. It'll be the fastest that a Razorback coach has done that. Once he gets there, I mean, they'd have to have a tremendous slide for him to not put another notch in his belt career-wise at Arkansas. But he should be the second fastest to get to 100 wins. You have to go back to Eddie Sutton, who got there in his first 124 games. Muss has already coached, I think, 147, something like that. So he's not going to beat that, but he'll be the second fastest to 100 wins as an Arkansas coach. So that's, tonight's the first opportunity to move off that 95 number, get to 96, And then if you win these first 4 home games, and if you're a Hog fan, you know your team's going to be favored. You hope you do. You go off to the Bahamas needing 1 win from us to get to 100. But that stuff, I'm getting into the weeds a little bit about stuff that really right now what matters is the game in front of you, where you are going to talk beyond it a little bit. But let's also go back to this game. Now, someone asked about Jalen Graham. Jalen Graham, I reported this back in early October that he did not go through pro day. And so when that got out, that was the first indication that something was amiss. I got word pretty quickly that it was his back. The word spasm wasn't used, but it was back. And so I wondered then, what did that mean? How long? That kind of thing. And so he missed Arkansas's exhibition season, missed both games. And our last media opportunity with Eric Musselman midweek last week, he said that he thinks Graham's on pace to be back and in the lineup and available tonight. And so we'll see if that's the case. I haven't heard anything different or otherwise on that one. And so Graham gives on that front line, 6'10" senior forward. 2 years ago, second team all Pac-12. So this is an all-conference kind of guy. Last year at Arkansas had his struggles defensively and doing some of the things that are expected in this program, I think, to have a consistent role. But he also had times where he really helped Arkansas offensively on that front line, moving through a schedule when you lost Trevor Brazile, 8 games and a few minutes into that 9th game against Greensboro. So Graham's just another guy that helps you. Coming into the season, before we knew about the injury, based on what we were hearing about what he was doing in June and July limited practices, and then when they got back on campus, he really was laser focused on the details, paying attention to the things that matter to Musselman, because you can have talents in certain areas, but you really need to bring that focus, that energy, and consistency at both ends of the floor, because going back to defense, it's going to all start there. So you got to have that. And I think now if you do have Graham back, it just makes this Arkansas team even tougher, because I keep saying it, I've said it for a long time, 1 through 5, it's the deepest Musselman's had with quality, with versatility at each position when you start going through that depth. And then I talk about, a diversity of skill sets. And what I mean by that is last year when you lost Brazile, you didn't have a floor spacer at all on your front line. That was it. You were one-dimensional there. When you played mostly without Nick Smith Jr., who was a 3-level scorer, and really the one guy that if he could have stayed with the team throughout the year, probably is much more efficient and things work better. And you've got at least one guy that can stretch and space the floor a little bit, who you're counting on game in and game out. Arkansas really was without that in the backcourt as well. So they got one-dimensional. So I think this team has a diversity of skills through each position, 1 through 5, that changes everything based on matchups. Musselman can go small. He can go traditional. He can even go a big lineup and put Brazile at the 3. And he did some of that against Purdue. You can look at guys like Jeremiah Davenport and Joseph Penning is changing the dynamics of your offense because of their quick strike ability on the perimeter. And now defenses have to account for that. Sometimes it's a change of pace, just a different look like that. And they think they're sinking in on what you're doing. And now you've changed the dynamic and they've got to adjust and then play to that. And there's not a lot of film. This is the one advantage Arkansas has when you look at what Musselman does, retooling the roster as much as he does every year, is that there's not a lot of film of guys playing together. Whereas with Purdue bringing 7 of 8 back, if you're the Boilermaker fan base, you love having most everybody back from a team that won 29 games last year and was a number 1 seed in the tournament. Yeah, they were upset, but won the Big Ten. But at Arkansas, Musselman's shown his way of doing it works. And part of what I think helps Arkansas is they're not easy to scout right away. Because you haven't seen a lot of guys play together. So out of the gates, Arkansas is going to have a chance to get comfortable at home before they go to the Bahamas. They're going to get a chance I think this will be a time we talk so much about rotations, that I think you almost put that out the window just a little bit, put it aside for a little bit, because I think these games, if things go well for Arkansas, are going to give Musselman an opportunity to let a lot of guys play and see what they bring to the table, see how pieces fit together. Some of these games might be tighter than you would like as a fan. And we might see Musselman at times tighten up the rotation to guys he thinks he was hoping to get some rest and save their legs maybe a little bit. He's not a guy that worries about Arkansas's conditioning. He talks about that when it comes up, using his bench, playing the long game with rest and things like that. He kind of bristles at that. But still, you're still learning about your team, and it's a nice, ancillary benefit if you can, see some other guys on the court because you're up 15 or 20 late, or different stretches of the game where you want to see maybe a combination, and you feel like your team's in command. So these are things we keep an eye on against teams like this. But at the same time, you don't go into and saying, well, this is how this is going to play out, because you don't know. Any team can rise up on any given night and give Arkansas fits. We've seen Arkansas, even though they're 33-0 at home in Bud Walton Arena against non-conference opponents, it's a situation where not all of those games have been runaway. There's been some tight ones and some hotly contested ones. So anything's on the table, but I think this team is built for it. There's 34 years of collective Division I experience. There's proof in the pudding, at least in one kind of matchup, even though it doesn't count. They still played, and that is a great opponent. And you traded shots evenly, and I thought Arkansas was the better team at both ends when you looked at the arc of the game. There were areas, Purdue dominated on the glass, plus 13, 14-1 in offensive rebounds. That fed 17-0 advantage in second chance points. When you look at that stat, if you just started there, you'd say, you know what? This Arkansas team really struggled scoring in the paint, probably. Or if Arkansas was good scoring in the paint, Purdue was just better. 17-0 second chance points. What does that tell me? There are probably some offensive rebounds, putbacks, things around the basket. Well, some of that's true, but Arkansas won points in the paint 34-30. And what that tells me was, aside from getting just pretty much bludgeoned on the offensive glass, Arkansas did an outstanding job of getting downhill and attacking, finding advantage, hitting driving lanes, and using superiority in athleticism, quickness, and skill. There's dribble drive skill. It's not just about put your head down and go. Some guys have dribble drive skill. They feel when they can get all the way. They feel when they need to change direction. They have a feel for pulling up. They know where their spots are, veteran guys especially, and you see that diversity. I mean, L. Ellis, Caleb Battle, Tremont Mark, Devo Davis started the game off with a runner. It wasn't one of those games for Devo to score a lot. He has games like that. But all of Arkansas's guards can attack, and they know where their spots are, and they can beat you in multiple ways. And so we talk about, well, Arkansas's got to get better as a three-point shooting team. They've addressed that. You go back through October, we've seen a lot of evidence that they're going to be better there. Not just guys like Davenport and Pinion coming off the bench. Or playing a role at times in that top 8 rotation. But we're talking about that core group of guards I just mentioned, who are kind of locked in, barring injury or something else weird happening, into that 6-7 rotation. But those guys can beat you in multiple ways. And so when you can shoot the three, it forces defense to account for you differently. They can't cheat, they can't help, they can't sag as much. And so you make them pay when the ball moves first and the defense is out, having to recover. That's when those driving lanes are even better than when you try to dribble drive into offense to begin with, which is what Arkansas's team last year did a lot of. So I talk about all that to say this Alcorn State matchup, a couple of things. Rebounding, this is one of the better offensive rebounding teams in the country last year, top 35. So there's that. Arkansas it's a different team though, different size-wise obviously than Purdue and talent-wise. So it gets more done with less if you're talking about size and hitting the glass. Sometimes you just out quick teams, and it's your scheme and how you play. So Arkansas's got a different kind of matchup with a team that rebounds well on the offensive glass. Overall, not a great rebounding team, but offensively, how does Arkansas contend with that? This is also a team like Arkansas that likes to force turnovers. One of the best in the country, nearly 15 turnovers forced per game last year, and 8 steals per game, ranked in the top 50 or 60 in the country. So this is a team that turns you over and gets into you. I talked about Arkansas's ability to drive and get to the basket. Well, you also have to take care of the basketball to have those opportunities. And so, your possessions and shots on goal go down for you to utilize your strengths if you're turning the ball over. Arkansas has been a program the last couple of years that have had those what Musselman calls self-inflicted wounds, not forced turnovers, just poor decisions, guys not being on the same page, trying to do something outside their wheelhouse. I think this group's going to be better at that, but Purdue did force 15 turnovers. I thought a lot of that was on Arkansas self-inflicted wounds. And, really Arkansas forced 20 and had those 14 steals, but it was only advantage +5 in the turnover department. And it wasn't a huge advantage, in terms of what Purdue then had on the offensive glass advantage. So it didn't exactly cancel that out. So Arkansas wants to clean it up on that end of the floor. This is a team also that does well getting to the free throw line, over 20 attempts per game. That ranked in the top 100 in college basketball last year. Arkansas was a fouling team last year. I don't know, Purdue, that was one of Purdue's strengths, not only offensive glass, but the other big strength was not only getting to the line and being efficient, but getting to the line a lot more than its opponent. And that was certainly how it ended up. +8 there, but Arkansas was much more efficient, plus only -4 in makes. So they kept it close in that, in that disparity. But also, Arkansas, it looks to be a better free throw shooting team. So you want to stay competitive in these games in terms of free throw attempts at minimum. But Arkansas is a program that's enjoyed being one of the best at getting to the line in volume. They were the #1 team in that a couple of years ago. They've been top 10 2 or 3 times in getting to the line. They've been really efficient until last year when it was just under 70%. I think this team can be maybe push higher than mid-70s in percentage. We'll see how that plays out. But I think in a game like this, we've identified Alcorn State's team strengths: offensive rebounding, forcing turnovers and getting steals, and then getting to the free throw line. Those are areas you want to contest shots. I talked about that earlier defensively, but you don't want to be fouling at the same time. This is going to be a team that's going to be able to bring more quickness than Purdue did. It's just a different matchup. But I think Arkansas, obviously I'm not into predicting scores or predicting who's going to win games. I do think Arkansas should win this game. I don't think anybody will disagree with that. I don't see a path for Alcorn State when you say if both teams are playing well. Even if both teams play well, I don't see a path for Alcorn State to win this game. I think Arkansas has to have just a really bad night, and Alcorn State has to be clicking on all cylinders. Anything can happen in college basketball. But just going through some of the individual players, what is Joshua, Kendall, and Thorne? No, it's not a law firm. Those are the 3 key returning players for for Alcorn State. And so, you've got a guard in there, double figure score, 4 points, 4 rebounds coming back. And Joshua, Kendall's a double figure scorer in the front line, 6'7", 4". It's not a big team. And he's also around 7 rebounds per game. Thorne was 9 points last year, but he's a guy that Musselman feels like is in a group of 4 guards. You got 3 other guys coming in that backcourt that Musselman thinks is going to give Alcorn State some perimeter punch and some 3-point shooting. So that's something else. Arkansas, last year did a good job of defending the 3 line, trying to keep attempts down, funnel teams to the sides and not to the middle, and not give up clean looks from 3. Because when you get to the middle of the floor, it opens up everything, and that's where you start giving up open looks. And so for a team that's contesting shots really well right now, you want to keep Alcorn State out of the middle, keep them on the sides, on each wing, and really try to take away their spacing and their ability to get good looks. And so even if this is a team Musselman has some concerns about shooting from 3, now you just don't want to have defensive breakdowns and let some guys get hot. So, that really, this is also a team tempo-wise. Let's talk about that. Scored in the high 60s last year. They want to dictate tempo in a sense to minimize possessions and hopefully keep the score low. That's obviously the best way for Alcorn State to have a chance to win, is to maybe keep the score down in the 60s. Arkansas doesn't always dictate tempo. Against Purdue, the Boilermakers certainly dictated it in the first half. I think Arkansas did a better job as the game went on. There were times where the tempo and some fast break opportunities looked really good. There were other times that I thought Arkansas, even if it wasn't dictating pace, it still did really good work offensively, getting downhill, getting leverage, and getting to the basket or getting into mid-range spots. We talk about individual guys. We know what Tremont Mark meant in that game. Hit the big 3. Being the featured ball handler at the end of the game, that was the go-to guy. That was the playmaker that Musselman chose in this game. And it may be something we see a lot of because of, proof is in the early pudding. It's in the batter mix, man. I mean, the guy hit that pull-up 3 off the bounce, and we go to overtime. And then in overtime, he hits a pull-up J from the nail. That extended Arkansas to a 7-0 run at that point. 5-point lead, and then he hits his last 3 free throws. That was the one area he struggled. When you put the ball in a guy's hands, there's going to be times if he's creating and he's a problem. He's going to get fouled. You got to go and knock down free throws, especially down the stretch of games. Arkansas got over that hump. Musselman said he never considered taking the ball out of Mark's hands, and probably a wise thing to do. I didn't mention L. Ellis in that run, again, since we're going back in time a little bit. But he was big because he wasn't in the closing group. Devo Davis went down with an injury, collided with big Zach Edey, 300 pounds, train coming at you. That he's probably going to win that battle 99% of the time. And, they both got up slow. Devo a little slower. He came out. Ellis came in and finished out regulation. But in overtime, Arkansas had 3 poor possessions. Mark gets fouled on one and misses both free throws. So that was an empty one. And then back-to-back possessions, Arkansas has a shot clock violation and then a pass that skipped over into the backcourt for a turnover there. And then Ellis took over in a couple possessions. And this is where I thought, Ellis was so good leading up to the Purdue game as a lead guard, as a guy running your team, making good decisions, making the right reads, showing you he can score efficiently and run the team, facilitate, and set our guys up. I thought he struggled mostly against Purdue in the lead guard role. He picked up his dribble out high. These are things that are correct. These are things, he's a work in progress. He's been a score first guy most of his career. He led a bad Louisville team in scoring and assists. He was their lead guard. This is a little different right now. Expectations are high, and Arkansas, to be a well-oiled machine, you're going to need that lead guard to understand. So I thought there were times in that game, there are 2 turnovers, but there were some passes that went awry that got Arkansas out of flow. He dribbled to spots with nowhere to go, left his feet some. But in that overtime, his offensive scorer first instincts took over. And man, is he good. They had the 3 consecutive bad possessions. He gets downhill on a drive, gets leverage, uses his body. I mean, this was a full steam. It's hard when you're going full speed to the rim to not overshoot it or leave it short with all that momentum. And he had the perfect touch with contact off a big and one. Arkansas goes from 2 down to 1 up in overtime. Arkansas gets a stop on the next possession. Ellis shows his creativity, kind of weaved a couple of quick moves getting into the paint. And then he had a little pull up, little 10, 12 footer in the paint. And now Arkansas, it's a 5-0 run. Arkansas is going up 3, 1 more stop. And I mentioned that Mark pull up Jay from the nail. And now you've got a 7-0 run in overtime. And that was it. That was pretty much it. You can't have just offense in an extra period and win that way. That's not how this team is constructed. You got to get stops. You got to be a good defensive team. Arkansas held Purdue to 1 of 6 shooting from the field in overtime, in building and basically putting the game away, and got a turnover with about 7 seconds left and iced them at the free throw line. Chandler Lawson knocks down 2 big ones. But I thought, it ended up officially being 2 of 7 for Purdue because there was a goaltend call at the buzzer when the game was over. I mean, it was just academic at that point. What does the scoreboard look like? Arkansas, instead of winning by 6, wins by 4. But I thought several things when I mentioned the offense of those guys. We haven't really even talked about Brazile and what he's done. By the way, Trevor Brazile today named to the Naismith. This is the 50-player watch list for the Naismith postseason National Player of the Year. So that's a great honor. 50 players, the list starts out with. He's on that list. We know he's on the Karl Malone list. That's a 20-player watch list to start the season for postseason best forward in the country. Now it's Player of the Year. We know he's been a first-team All-SEC pick by both the SEC media and the league's coaches. So you talk about preseason accolades. This guy has them all. And you understand why Musselman said back in December last year when he went down with an injury, this was a guy that was one of the top 5 players in the SEC. I believe that. Had he stayed healthy, we're not talking about Trevor Brazile right now at Arkansas. We're talking about him in an NBA rookie season somewhere. So Arkansas is glad to have him back. Obviously, what he's been through, his pro day was the first we heard of him doing any 5-on-5, but it wasn't just that. I mean, he blew everybody away. I've talked about it a lot. I've talked to several scouts. They told me this guy, look, he's a lottery pick if he plays like he did at pro day. He had a good game. He had a good, active, productive, efficient game against Purdue. You didn't necessarily believe that would happen because in the previous exhibition game when he was kind of getting his feet wet and just getting out there, he did get 19 minutes. But he was, nothing stood out great as far as stats or anything like that. He had a couple of 2 or 3 cluster plays where like, yeah, that's him. He's, that's the guy that we saw before he got hurt. But then he kind of put it all together. Those 15 points, 5 rebounds, 3 steals, had a block. And I thought he did a really good job we talked about Zach Edey's being a matchup problem. Trevor Brazil's a matchup problem. That's what he brings to the table. He's a guy that no matter what you're good at on defense, he's got a little something that you might not be able to practice. You can't prepare for. You can't deal with it till you see it. And then if you take one or two things away, he's got 2 or 3 more things that he can throw at you. That's why NBA scouts talk about him in terms of potential lottery pick. I think he's a first round. If he stays healthy and just does what I've seen so far, this guy's going to be drafted in the first round, at minimum in the 20s somewhere. That may be where it is for him. He may have a shot to have one of those seasons where he puts himself in the lottery. And again, we're, getting ahead a little bit, looking ahead, but Brazil already has shown value in a big exhibition game matchup. So against Alcorn State tonight, you want to see, what does he offer Arkansas tonight? How much is he on the court? What kind of a game is this? What kind of impact does he need to have? Chandler Lawson, I think, is a guy that we may see in the starting lineup again. Mekhi Mitchell was the regular starter last year at center, a 20-minute-a-game guy. That's what he got against Purdue, playing off the bench. He came off the bench in both exhibition games because the 6'8", 6'7", 6'8", it feels like he's 6'10" because he's got that 7'7" wingspan. And he plays just a crafty, gritty, I understand my strengths and weaknesses. I understand what you need. Let me help you win. He brings that element. He's a connector. I use that word with him because he kind of connects everybody. He helps you set your defense. On offense, he's not that missing link if everybody else is covered up and they're sagging in on a Brazil, or they're trying to run 2 guys at him and other guys are having off nights and they just leave him open. He still connects you because if the ball finds its way to him and it's low on the clock, or he's got an open shot, he's competent. He can knock it down. He can fix it. That's, it's not 4-on-5 on that end with him in the game. He can step out and knock down a mid-range shot. He can knock down open threes. 10 points against Purdue, 3 of 4 from the field, 1 of 2 from 3, made all 3 of his free throws. Brazil, by the way, made all 5 of his. But Lawson, man, only 2 rebounds, but 3 blocks, 3 steals, getting all these deflections. He's just, he's a guy that you just got to have guys like that. Arkansas's had them in the past, a Trey Wade, help you any way you can. I go back to Justin Smith. Justin Smith wasn't an offensive juggernaut, but he was a hell of a defender. He could have monster rebounding games, but he just connected everybody. And I thought his value was probably greater when you looked at, when you look at talking points for teams. I think maybe his value was greater than what was given credit for at the time. But Chandler Lawson, I'm not saying he's going to have that kind of role with the kind of minutes Justin Smith had starting just about every game when he wasn't hurt for a handful of games, but I do think he's a guy that factors into the point of maybe being a starter right now. We'll see we'll see if that's the case tonight or not. We talked about Graham and what he brings. He's a 15 feet and in offensive threat. Let's see what he can do to help Arkansas defensively. We haven't seen him in the exhibition season. Let's see if he's ready to go tonight. Bay Fall did not play against Purdue. Musselman said the matchup, they sent him to the scores table and brought him back. I think this is a game where we could see some Bay Fall. We've talked about the guards in the backcourt. We talk about Jeremiah Davenport and Pinion. Not a lot of production against Purdue when you look at the knocking down threes, just 1. But what did they do? They were both plus in the box. Sometimes that can be misleading, but I think in their case it wasn't. I think it really wasn't. I think the dynamics helped other players when you're able to be a gravity floor spacer and keep defenders locked in on you. That makes that defense easier to attack for others. So all these things are players we could see tonight. Layden Blocker, I loved his minutes. I feel like I've waited too long to talk to him 35 minutes into this. 6 points in 8 minutes. He was efficient. He attacked the basket. In the second half, he hits a big pull-up 20-footer at the end of his shot clock. It takes some stones to play as fearlessly and as effectively as he did. He also had an assist, a nice lob pass to Brazil. So turnovers, fouling, so those are freshman things that he's going to work through. Those are things he's going to learn from. But you start with the guy's fearless. And he's not, the moment's not too big for him. So if that's true against Purdue, you think he can build on that moving forward. This might be a game where we see more of Layden Blocker, maybe not. But we just kind of keep our eyes looking around the roster. I haven't said as much about Battle. Technically, he was Arkansas's leading scorer in preseason, 13 points a game. I love his toughness on defense. There was that 2-play offense. He gets it. He had a nice little fadeaway pull-up jumper on the left side and follow that up with just taking the ball from his man after he crossed around midcourt and went in for a layup. So he had a personal 4-0 run against Purdue. Arkansas was down 4-0 run by battle, and now they're up 2. You got to have plays like that. Well, you were already close in the game, but that was a low tempo first half, and it wasn't always easy to score. And so you need guys that are weapons like that. 13 points per game in the exhibition season. Again, that led Arkansas. But 5 big rebounds against Purdue. This can help Arkansas. Backcourt can help Arkansas solve any question marks on the glass. And Mark led the team. Tremont Mark, we talked about him, with 6 rebounds in the last game. Led him with 4 assists. So you had 2 blocks from that wing spot. He's a jack of all trades. I've written that. He's one of those guys you don't know how he's going to beat you, but it might be in multiple ways and probably will be. He's like Devo in terms of resume. He's seen a lot, helped create a lot of wins when it matters in championship time. And so you ride with guys like that. We talked about Arkansas defensively. We talk about the 3-point shooting. Free throw shooting should be better. Now you just got to get to the line. So you have a little bit of a dynamic going on here. If you shoot a lot of threes, you don't drive as much, and so you limit your free throw attempts. But if you're knocking down threes and you're scoring, getting to the basket, like Arkansas did against Purdue, shooting over 50%, you can afford to maybe, not just kill it in the free throw game. But that's where Arkansas has been really good consistently prior to last year. So you're kind of keeping an eye on that, even moving into the season opener. What does Arkansas do there? What's the margins comparing Arkansas to Alcorn State, and what's the efficiency? But we're about to wrap it up here, 35 minutes in. I do think Arkansas is obviously favored to win tonight. I do think Arkansas is going to win this game. By how much and who plays and what are some of the dynamics? Again, rotation. I didn't get into a lot of that today. I didn't get into game closers today. I don't know that those things matter as much in this game. They could. And if they do, if it does come to that, I think the closing group we saw against Purdue is who you'll see again, with the exception being Devo, assuming he's ready to go and healthy. Who else is not in that last group? Who was, because Devo was out. The other thing is, I think Mekhi Mitchell can still be interchangeable in a closing situation with Lawson. I also think a guy like Davenport and possibly Pinion could be on the floor depending upon the situation you're in late in the game. Let's say you're down a possession or two in the final minute. You need a 3-point shooter. You might need a 3-point shooter through parts of the game regardless, and then at the end of the game, you might need it. Layden Blocker, we just talked about him and his toughness. He was on the court for Arkansas's final defensive possessions in both the first and second half. So the game is on the line, especially that second half, the end of that second half. He's on the court defensively. That was a substitution, offense for defense, to close out a defense possession and give yourself a chance to get to overtime. Layden Blocker's a guy that could be in a situational role as a closer. So this is why I keep talking about the quality of depth. Yeah, Musselman's at some point is going to be 7-8 tight. And some games, 5 or 6 guys are going to play the vast majority of those minutes of the 7 or 8 who get on the court. But he's got the versatility now to change up some of that 7 and 8, depending upon situations, foul trouble, injuries, all kinds of stuff. And you're bringing quality in. You're not just putting somebody in with a pulse and hope that it works out. You got guys that give you all kinds of advantages and options. I think Arkansas is not only built to weather injuries and foul trouble, I think they're built to play different kinds of styles. If they're not able to dictate tempo, I think they can play a half-court game competently at both ends. If they prefer to get out and run, secondary break included. We've seen a lot of that already. I think they're built to do that as well. And I think because you've added that outside threat, that dimension of 3-point shooting, it makes it easier for your drive game, and it makes it easier for guys that have that extra craft if they're not going to be in a catch and shoot mode outside. But you want to have guys that can do that too. So I think Musselman's kind of blending in a lot of stuff. That's why when I made those comparisons to the national championship team, Nolan went out and got some big guys. He needed to get bigger. Arkansas had really good, scrappy players, a lot of great guard play. He had Corliss Williamson, but he needed more. He needed more on that front line. He went out and got Darnell Robinson, Lee Mayberry, excuse me, Lee Wilson. You had Dwight Stewart on that front line, but he was often a perimeter guy. When you talk offense, he was effective rebounding at times and scoring around the basket too. But Arkansas really got deep and good on that front line, and that was the difference between making a run to the Final Four or getting to Sweet 16s and getting all the way to the national title game. I think Musselman has addressed weakness areas. I think he's addressed lack of being able to deal with injuries in a certain position group, because once that happens, now you're paying for it with 2 or 3 losses that not only affect your ability to have versatility to finish games with a win, but it's also impacting your eventual seeding and what your resume looks like. So you've got to be able to adjust on the fly. He's great at game planning and making in-game adjustments in terms of X's and O's, but it still comes down to Jimmys and Joes. And so you want to have enough guys that can play multiple positions and play them well and give you versatility in what you want to do based on matchups. I think he's got all of it now. I think these pieces are now together to maybe take that next step. We don't know how it's all going to play out, but I think it's all there for Arkansas to get to a final weekend of the NCAA tournament, and that's the Final Four. All right, so I'm talking Final Fours in March. Here we are, November 6th. It's opening game for the season. All around college basketball, certainly at Arkansas, that's the case tonight. Alcorn State, I'll be shoving off here a little bit for Fayetteville, and we will have a post-game analysis of what went down, how it all played out, who looked good, what they need to work on, because it won't be perfect, win or lose, but I think Arkansas is going to win. Signing off, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live, and thank my sponsor, Jose's Bar and Grill in Tawnytown. We do our pregames live there. Jose's is closed on Monday, so today and next Monday, the pregame will be somewhere else. Today it's in my man cave here in Little Rock. Until tonight, see you then.